President Donald Trump's travel ban has run into several roadblocks in the courts. His latest executive order was stopped by a federal judge before it took effect last week. Oregon's Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum joined her counterpart in Washington state in the fight against the Trump administration.
Certainly the president has a lot of leeway in national security matters. There's no question about that. But that doesn't mean that this particular executive order is appropriate, and I believe it to be illegal.
Tonight, Rosenblum joins us to discuss her lawsuit against Donald Trump, plus her agenda in Salem. From KGW News, this is Straight Talk.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Chris Willis, filling in this week for Laurel Porter. Thanks for being with us. Across the country, we've seen state attorneys general stepping up to challenge the Trump administration's travel ban. A challenge in Washington state managed to block Trump's first order, and a challenge in Hawaii blocked the second. Oregon's attorney general joined the Washington case and has supported the Hawaii case. Here to discuss that effort and more is Oregon Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum. We thank you for being with us on Straight Talk. Good to see you again. Earlier this month, as we mentioned, Oregon officially joined Washington in the lawsuit against President Trump's travel ban. Why did you think it was important to take such a big step in challenging this particular executive order?
Well, we were planning on joining from the very beginning, and in light of what happened in Washington, which of course we were delighted when it went to the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit upheld Washington's position, we were somewhat delayed in actually being able to intervene and get into the case. We felt that the second executive order really wasn't all that different from the first. Obviously, it's a little bit improved. There's no question about it. But it still has the discriminatory intent behind it. We feel it discriminates on the basis of religion, obviously the Muslim religion, as all those countries have majority Muslim faith people, and also on the basis of national origin and other factors. So we've now joined the suit. We also filed the amicus brief with Hawaii. I noticed you actually showed a photograph of me with my colleague Doug Chin, the Attorney General of Hawaii. So we have been involved in both cases.
And when that was heard, you happened to be in Hawaii.
I was.
Tell us about that. We have a picture there.
I was there for the Conference of Western Attorneys General. I chaired that conference last year. And this year, Doug Chin is the chair. So it was his presidential initiative I was there for. We were there with island attorneys general from all the Micronesia, the islands all over the Pacific. And then the next day, sure enough, was the hearing at the court. So I had the honor of getting to go over there with Doug.
Is it a legal perspective? Is it a matter of principle when joining this with Washington and then the support of Hawaii? Is there strength in numbers in this kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's important to have different judges and their perspectives and different circuits for that matter. And we now have several circuits involved. We have the Fourth Circuit. We have our circuit, of course, still. But it also, I think there's no question, state attorneys general are working very closely together. We've succeeded in doing that over the years. This isn't anything new. But in this particular case, the stakes are higher than ever. And so we know each other well. We've worked together before. And we think that when a judge, when a court, when the local community sees that we're involved, that says a lot. And the business community has joined us as well, as you know.
Yeah, on the other side of that coin, the president says, and has campaigned heavy on this, and claims he has wide latitude when it comes to national security and immigration policy. That's why he's president. That's why the executive branch. The Trump administration argues that the revised executive order addresses those legal concerns you mentioned, like removing the references to religion. Why continue to challenge? Does it not go far enough?
Right. Oh, as I said, it definitely is an improvement, but it still just has a discriminatory intent. And he can't get away from that. You can't just snap your fingers and make intent go away. And we believe that that is not only terribly unfair to the people of those countries, but to those who are from those countries, who are in the United States, who have family, who can no longer travel to visit their family or bring them here. It also has a huge impact on our medical community and on our residents, for example, who don't get the benefit of, say, a doctor, a foreign-born doctor from one of those countries, of whom there are many in the United States, and especially here in Oregon.
Yeah, no question. And that answer leads me into this question of part of the case I think you have to make is Oregonians are harmed by this travel ban. Are those issues that harm Oregonians? Are there other is there another harmful nature to this executive order that will harm Oregonians?
Well, we don't bring any lawsuits unless they harm Oregonians. I don't, because I'm the Attorney General for the people of Oregon, and that's how I evaluate everything I do, pretty much, on any given day. I'm the lawyer for the people of this state. There's harm to the business community. There's harm to the university community. There's harm, certainly, to the medical community. there's harm to our citizens.
Yeah.
There's harm to our immigrants and their families, their kids, who are totally scared that their parents are going to be taken away from them.
Yeah, there are in Oregon, I think heavily carried by the Democratic candidate, Hillary Clinton, there are about 800,000 Oregonians who did vote for Trump. And there are Republicans and Democrats who just don't know the intricacies of this bill and don't know, they don't have time or inclination perhaps to get into the real fine details of this executive order. Tell us kind of like, what do you hear from people? And when you have conversations, if we're going to talk nuts and bolts, what's wrong with this legislation? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I don't want you to make an unfair assumption, but.
Well, first of all, it's not legislation.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind. You twice have said legislation.
Right.
It's an executive order. It's something that was, at least the first one, was absolutely thrown together.
Yes.
The second one, a little bit better, a little bit more careful. But the bottom line is what the president needs to be doing, if it's really what he intends to do and not to discriminate, is to look at ways to ensure that people coming into the country are coming in who should be coming in. And you don't need to issue a discriminatory executive order to do that. And I see that they're starting to do a little bit more of that, and we'll be keeping a close watch on that as well.
What does it mean from a practical standpoint? Do we have attorneys from your office working with Washington and working with Hawaii?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we have excellent attorneys at my office. I have a great solicitor general in the appellate division, and I have lawyers in my trial division who are working very closely with the Washington Attorney General and with the Attorneys General's offices of the other states that have joined, which includes California, New York, Maryland, Massachusetts.
Sure. Okay, we have a lot of issues to get to. I want to mention this quickly, and just one question on this. We've seen federal immigration, ICE agents, tracking undocumented immigrants down at the Multnomah County Courthouse. County officials, presiding judges all say this is wrong, and it leads to, you hear the word fear a lot in describing this kind of a situation. As a former prosecutor, as a judge, or prosecutor and judge, do you think that's appropriate for federal agents to be in our courthouse, and does it add to the difficulties in, that fear and preventing people from going about their business?
That's a softball, absolutely. I think it's a really bad thing because our courthouses should be safe places for people to come to access justice. People who come there often are fearful about, for example, family members in the case of needing restraining orders, witnesses who come to testify, say in the case of a murder or some other kind of horrible instance that occurred. We need our courthouses to be a safe place for people to come. And unfortunately, having ICE agents there is having just the opposite impact. There's now evidence to demonstrate that people are not coming. Their numbers are down. People are doing more. Thankfully, there's a way to do restraining orders online. More people are doing that because they're afraid to come to the courthouse. Even jurors are afraid to come to the courthouse. And of course, they're required to come. I'm on jury duty in a couple of weeks.
Exactly.
Thank goodness I don't have to worry about that, but other people do.
It is a requirement. Okay, the travel ban, not the only place, and this other issue that we are challenging the Trump administration, concerned about some of the cutbacks taking shape at the Environmental Protection Agency. How would that affect the environmental protection here in Oregon? And can you expand a little bit on the concerns you have with that?
Right. Well, I have a whole unit at my office, our Natural Resources Environmental Unit. I have an Environmental Crimes Unit as well. And we're keeping a close watch on everything that Mr. Pruitt, the new director of the EPA, my former colleague, the former Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, he brought, we're basically taking a page from his playbook because he brought more lawsuits against the Obama administration to try to essentially undo all the good things that the EPA had done during the Obama years. And now, of course, he's the head of this agency. So we're very concerned about that. Matters of air quality, matters of water quality, air, land, and water. That's what that's what environment is all about. Fortunately, in Oregon, we also have state laws. And as long as we can avoid the preemption issue, which means that the federal government essentially trumps, if you will.
Sure.
Too bad we have to use that word. But anyway, it has meaning. If it trumps the state law, then we're in trouble if there's a weakening. We're concerned about the weakening of regulations at the federal level because Oregon prides itself on being a clean state, a state that's progressive. We have a governor who really cares about that. And we have state agencies that my office represents. And we intend to push back against the administration, against the EPA, if they weaken regulations that we believe are going to dirty up our air, water, and land.
And those issues so important to everybody in Oregon and even the Pacific Northwest. Do you see your office getting more aggressive and having a bigger role if those are not given the priority they should?
Absolutely. We're already signing on to letters. We're already looking at potential for litigation. Mostly what we've been involved in is joint sign-ons to Congress, to various agencies, to make it clear that we are going to be at the front lines on those issues as well.
All right, let's shift gears. I wasn't sure I would ever have to sit down with the Attorney General and talk about legal marijuana, but U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions recently calls marijuana a drug almost as dangerous as heroin, rejects the idea in America where marijuana is sold on every street corner. He's questioning medical marijuana as well. Let's listen to Sessions now if we can, speaking to reporters recently, and then we'll get a quick reaction. Let's listen.
I think medical marijuana has been hyped maybe too much. It's possible that some dosages can be constructed in a way that might be beneficial. I acknowledge that. The federal law on marijuana remains in effect in every state. It's not eviscerated because a state ceases to enforce the law in that state.
That raises a lot of eyebrows here in Oregon. Reaction to Sessions?
Yeah, he came and spoke to the attorneys general a couple of weeks ago. In fact, his first speech that he gave, he brought up marijuana. We didn't even ask him about it. A couple of us, I wasn't able to be one of them, went over to visit with some of the folks at the US DOJ to talk with them about the issues that we have in Colorado, Washington, Oregon, obviously. We're all states that not only have medical marijuana for many years, but we also now have legalized recreational marijuana. And we are all committed, including the Republican Attorney General of Colorado, to ensuring that our industries, young as they are, grow and develop. We're proud to have them, starting to be in place. I think our state agencies are doing a phenomenal job in our state legislature, and I'm proud that my office is helping to ensure that we have a robust and legal industry. I just disagree with Mr. Sessions about it being dangerous in the way heroin is. He ought to be focusing on prescription opioids if he's worried about drugs that are as dangerous as heroin.
And I want to talk about your efforts on that issue as well here in a second. But we got a lot of people, there's a lot of tax revenue coming from marijuana. There are a lot of folks who, for lack of a better term, bet the farm on this business and have invested their lives in this. Should we worry for the farmers and that the federal government could crack down on us here in Oregon?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think that we have any reassurance at this point. We still have the Cole memo in place from the last administration, but of course we know how easy it is to undo a memo. So it does remain to be seen, but I think, unfortunately, I can't give the kind of reassurance other than to say that I will be there to do everything I can to ensure that our legal industry does move forward.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk some of those state issues now. We're in the middle of a session in Salem. You have an ambitious legislative agenda. Let's start with talking about an issue that has come up on the federal level as well and that you just mentioned, opioid abuse. Tell us about your efforts there and the bill that you're pushing.
Right. Well, I don't know if I want to use the word pushing, but we are supporting a bill because the opioid epidemic is nationwide, and Oregon has not been spared. My understanding is about every day in Oregon we lose 3 people to essentially opioid poisoning. And what I mean by that is prescription drug abuse. And as you know, there's numerous drugs that qualify as opioids. And so what we're proposing, frankly, it looks like there's just too many drugs, too many pills out there that shouldn't be in the public sphere. They should be in medicine cabinets and disposed of when they're no longer needed. And so we're proposing a bill that would limit the first prescription for opioids after surgeries, minor surgeries and such, to 7 pills, 1 week's worth of pills, and then you got to go back and get more if you need them, unless a doctor actually specifically provides for an exception. We feel that that will actually reduce the amount of drugs in the
in the market,
and it will also keep down the addiction that occurs. People become addicted to opioids without having any clue that that's even a possibility, because they're just trying to recover from a minor surgery, for example.
You don't have to look far to see opioid abuse all over. I mean, you're exactly right with the country, but here in Oregon as well. Is there pushback to it? You've been so involved in the legislative session before. Can you ballpark it? Are you optimistic about it?
Let me say this. there's always going to be different views on proposed legislation. But in addition to legislation, we were able to give a grant from a settlement that we got from, kind of somewhat ironically, a pharmaceutical fraud case. So we're not just relying on legislation. We're going out and making sure that we're working on projects that provide for naloxone kits. Naloxone is a miracle, antidote to opioids and saving lives. We are helping with appropriate types of pain clinics, trying to get away from the pill mill concept to appropriate clinical supervision. And we are doing a lot of other really creative things. As far as this particular bill goes, I know there's some amendments. And we have a prescription drug monitoring program in Oregon that's been very effective. And the amendments may actually bring in the monitoring program to ensure that doctors and pharmacists are working even more closely to monitor each other so that there's not inappropriate prescribing.
Such an important
I'd like to say I hope that it would pass for sure in the form that we drafted it, but that hardly ever happens.
Right, especially in the legislative session. All right, we're going to talk more important state issues in just a second. More with Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum when we come back. We're back in 2 minutes with more Straight Talk. Stay there.